Hello, this is your reviewer from Frigid Reads. Hope you're having a good day today. This is my second set of thoughts on things I really couldn't cover in the written reviews of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Warning, there are spoilers past this point, so let's get to it. Starting with Carly Morgenthau, who is loosely speaking an adaptation of Carl Morgenthau, or perhaps better to say inspired by him. Carl is the first comic book flag smasher, of which there have been about three. He's the son of a Swiss diplomat. He grew up bouncing from, diplomatic post to diplomatic post, so he never really develops a sense of attachment to any one country. So when his father is murdered in a nationalist riot, he blames national loyalties and borders and commits himself to getting rid of them through violence and terrorism and getting other people to do the same thing. Honestly, he and Carly don't have a lot in common. He's kind of a child of wealth and privilege. She's a refugee. Um, his whole life is defined by national borders and loyalties, whereas for her, she kind of came of age in this weird borderless society because of the actions of an alien god. So she's, her backstory is a little out there, I guess. That said, I think Carly is a much more compelling character, and I wish they hadn't killed her. I like the idea of a young person struggling to deal with her feelings and to understand just the kind of power she can wield as a symbol, even from inside a jail cell. And I think that'd be a great storyline to visit. One that would echo a number of real life stories. I can only hope that her death continues to have an impact on Sam's story and she's not just forgotten. Another thing that comes to mind when I hear her name is the Morgenthau Plan, which was a plan by Henry Morgenthau Jr., Secretary of Treasury under FDR in World War II. Uh, to put it very simply, leaving out a lot of details, the plan was to basically dismantle Germany's industry and force the German nation to become a rather large patch of farmland to keep it from ever threatening Europe ever again. This was never pursued, especially when it turned out the plan would kill around 25 million Germans, something that everyone agreed was just a touch too Nazi to do. Yeah. Now, this isn't the only thing Henry Morgenthau would do. He also pushed to form the War Refugee Board, which would save at least 200,000 Jewish lives from the Nazis. I'm not sure if there's an actual connection between Henry Morgenthau and Carly, but I thought it was interesting historical trivia. Speaking of trivia, let's turn to Battlestar. So, Battlestar is also a comic book character. He was introduced as John Walker's sidekick when John Walker was the Super Patriot. They were both recruited from a pro wrestling company by the Power Broker and juiced up to have super strength. Now they've changed that backstory a lot for the better. I think dropping the pro wrestling angle was for the best. Originally, Marvel just called him Bucky, as he was the new Captain America's sidekick. But a lot of black fans wrote in saying, "Hey, Buck and Bucky applied to a black man has some really negative connotations. It's actually kind of a slur. Could you not?" And Marvel very wisely said, "You know what? That's our mistake. We're not going to do that. Let's name him Battlestar instead." You know, a choice for the better, I think. Uh, since then, though, Battlestar really just kind of disappeared from the Marvel pages. He went on to become a very, very minor hero. I feel like this series made much better use of him, even if Spellman kills him in the end to push Walker over the edge. At least he's had an impact in history in this version. Now, as for Bucky Barnes, oh, poor old Bucky. Poor Bucky. I was honestly surprised to see the Wakandians show up in a good way. Um, it's they don't seem to believe in the sovereignty of other countries. I know some folks are going to roll their eyes at an American complaining about this, but at least when Walker shows up, he's got the sanction of a legal entity. And Sam and Bucky seem to have the permission of at least most of the governments involved. But this announcement that the Wakandians have jurisdiction wherever they feel like, isn't that the same reason the Wakandian king was pushing for registration against the Avengers? They were upset that these guys would just show up out of nowhere and start fighting bad guys. I don't know. Seems kind of shady to me. And what's the stopping the other countries from banding together and telling the Wakandians, hey, enough of this? I mean, yes, Wakanda has more advanced technology, but their air force is numbered in the dozens, and their ground forces are at best the low tens of thousands. Plus, with Stark Tech and all sorts of stuff starting to spread out into Marvel Earth, that tech gap is shrinking rapidly, and I wouldn't depend on it if I was the Wakandians. They might want to normalize their relationships with other countries, is what I'm suggesting. But let's get back to Bucky. It must have really hurt, and Sebastian Shaw does a great job of just emoting with his face. I love it. It's great of just how hurt and betrayed he is when someone he considered a friend could just casually reach out and literally disarm him, especially when this was the person who told him, "Hey, you're free now, no strings on you." Um, Going back to episode 1, Bucky spends this whole series in a worse place than anyone, including Sam or Carly. And I like how they show that. I also like how they show that he needed a very specific type of therapy and therapist to get him to pull himself together. Not every therapist is going to work for every patient. Not every type of therapy works for everyone. That's not a reflection on the therapist or the patient. It's how it is. People are different. Bucky starts this series in a very negative headspace. He needs external validation to convince himself that he's more than the murdering meat machine that Hydra made him into. He got it from Steve, but now Steve is gone, and he wants to get it from Sam. Sam, however, who has been a therapist, knows that if he just hands it to Bucky, Bucky's never gonna heal. So he refuses. And eventually he's able to convince Bucky that he has to do the hard work to heal. And because of that, Bucky ends this series on the road to recovery. Another thing here is I do like how they show this as an ongoing process. It takes time and effort. The series doesn't end with Bucky just all better. It's just he's in a better place and he's going to get better. It also costs Bucky to heal. This isn't a free magic process. He has to do things he doesn't want to do for the benefits of other people to make amends or at least provide closure. But it does leave him in a better place at the end of this series, showing that even though it's a long, hard road, there's hope at the end of it. So, those are my thoughts. Did you have different ones or do you have questions? Well, feel free to leave them below or jump over to the blog and leave them in the comments there. You can even join us on the Patreon if you'd like. Anyways, next week will likely just be a written review for Blindman's Buff, which is a story of submarine espionage in the Cold War. I'm really looking forward to it. Until then, stay safe, keep reading.